don't think you're being asked to release a person. I think you're being asked to release an old version of yourself. Because on August 27th into August 28th, we're reaching one of the most emotionally significant points of August 2026, a full moon in Pisces, accompanied by a partial lunar eclipse. And this isn't just another full moon, it is an eclipse. Eclipses have a way of bringing something to the surface that we may have been avoiding, suppressing, postponing, or simply refusing to see. And here's the question I want you to keep in the back of your mind throughout this entire video. What are you holding on to that you've already outgrown? Because Pisces doesn't always ask us to fight for something. Sometimes Pisces asks us to surrender it. So let's look at the big picture. Let's start with what's actually happening in the sky. The full moon reaches its peak in Pisces at approximately 4.5 degrees, directly opposite the sun in Virgo. This full moon is also a partial lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses happen during a full moon when the Earth moves between the sun and the moon, and the Earth's shadow falls across the moon. In the partial lunar eclipse, only part of the moon enters Earth's darker inner shadow or umbra. But what we're interested in is the Pisces-Virgo axis. This is incredibly important. Virgo is asking, how can I fix this? Pisces asks, do I actually need to fix it? And Virgo will ask, let's analyze it. Pisces says, let's feel it. Virgo says, let's organize everything. And Pisces says, maybe it's time to let something go. And that's where this full moon gets interesting. Here's something I really want you to understand. A full moon traditionally is associated with culmination, illumination, completion, and emotional awareness. But when that full moon is also an eclipse, astrologers often treat the symbolism as intensified. So rather than asking, what can I manifest? This particular full moon may be better approached with, what am I ready to release? And Pisces is the perfect sign for that conversation. Pisces is associated with compassion, spirituality, imagination, dreams, intuition, surrender, endings, and the dissolution of boundaries. But Pisces also has a shadow side. And this is where things can get uncomfortable. Pisces can represent escapism, fantasy, denial, avoidance, over-idealizing people, ignoring red flags, trying to save everyone, carrying emotional baggage that doesn't belong to you, staying attached to something because you're remembering what it could have been rather than accepting what it actually is. And this eclipse can shine a very bright light on that. So let's talk about the Virgo-Pisces axis. This is where the story gets deeper. This eclipse is part of the ongoing Virgo-Pisces eclipse cycle that has been unfolding since 2024 and continues into 2027. And that means this isn't necessarily about something that suddenly appeared in your life this week. It may be the next chapter of a story you've already been living. Think back. What started changing in your life around 2024? What became uncomfortable? What did you begin questioning? Where did you realize that your old way of doing things wasn't working anymore? Because eclipses often work in chapters. You don't necessarily get the entire story on eclipse day. You get a revelation, then another one, then another, until eventually you realize, oh, that's what this was all about. So, what does Pisces want us to release? Well, it wants us to release the need to control the outcome. This may be one of the biggest messages of this eclipse. So, Virgo wants certainty. Pisces teaches surrender. And surrender does not mean giving up. There's a huge difference. Surrender means I've done what I can do. I've learned what I needed to learn. I can't control other person's choices. I can't force timing. I can't make something become what it isn't. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to control the ending. Because sometimes the ending doesn't need your permission. It simply needs your acceptance. So let's release the fantasy. This is a huge one. Pisces is imaginative. That's one of its gifts. But imagination can become fantasy. You may be holding on to an image of a relationship, a career, a person, dream, or future that exists primarily in your imagination. And this eclipse may ask, are you in love with the reality or the possibility? That's a powerful question, because sometimes we're not grieving what actually happened. We're grieving what we thought was going to happen. And those are two very different things. So let's talk about releasing the savior role. Pisces energy can be enormously compassionate. Okay? Compassion without boundaries can become self-abandonment. You can love someone without rescuing them. You can support someone without fixing their life. And you can care about somebody without carrying their emotional weight. And if you've spent years being the person who always understands, maybe always forgives, always gives another chance, always picks up the pieces, this eclipse could bring a very important realization. You don't have to destroy yourself to prove that you love somebody. So let's talk about releasing guilt. This is another major Pisces theme. Some people carry guilt for years. Guilt about a relationship. Guilt about leaving. Guilt about staying. Guilt about choosing themselves. Guilt about something that happened years ago. But here's the question. Is the guilt helping you become a better person? Or is it simply keeping you trapped in the past? Because there comes a point where accountability becomes wisdom and punishment becomes attachment. This eclipse can be an opportunity to say, I understand what happened. I understand my part. I've learned. And I'm allowed to move forward. So you'll also want to look at the releasing of needing to know the answers. This one is very Pisces. We live in a world obsessed with answers. Why did they do that? What's going to happen? When will it happen? What's the plan? What's next? But Pisces reminds us, some things unfold before they make sense. And sometimes you have to walk through the fog before you can see the road. You may not need another answer. You may need to trust what you already know. So let's take a look at the collective energy on this. We're going to zoom out. So astrology is a symbolic framework rather than a scientifically established method for predicting events. So think of this as interpretation of themes rather than literal prediction. The collective conversation around this eclipse may evolve around reality versus illusion, control versus surrender, perfection versus acceptance, service versus sacrifice, facts versus intuition, boundaries versus emotional merging. And that is the Virgo Pisces polarity in a nutshell. We're being asked to find the middle because neither extreme works. You don't want to live entirely in fantasy, but you don't want to analyze your life so much that you stop living. You don't want to fix everyone, but you also don't want to stop caring. You don't want to surrender your power, but you also don't want to spend your entire life fighting reality. This lesson is balance. We had the solar eclipse on August 12th. That was in the sign of Leo, and it was about 20 degrees. So now think of the two eclipses as chapters in the same story. So the Leo eclipse on the 12th is asking, who are you becoming? The Pisces eclipse coming up is asking, what do you need to stop carrying? Leo is saying, step forward. Pisces says, let go. Leo says, choose yourself. Pisces says, release what isn't yours. Leo says, become visible. And Pisces says, release the need for everyone to understand you. And together, they can create a powerful transition. So what is the most important question of this eclipse? I want you to ask yourself this. What am I exhausted from carrying? Not what should you be carrying? Not what does everyone expect you to carry? Not what would make somebody else happy? What are you exhausted from carrying? Is it an old relationship, an old identity, a family expectation, a grudge, a dream that no longer fits, a fear, a responsibility that isn't yours, the need to be perfect, the need to be needed, the need to know exactly what's coming next? Because Pisces doesn't always release things through confrontation. Sometimes Pisces releases through acceptance. What can this eclipse teach us about our emotional closure? And this is important. Closure doesn't always come from another person. Sometimes you're waiting for somebody to apologize. You're waiting for an explanation. You're waiting for someone to admit what they did. You're waiting for them to give you closure you deserve. But what happens if they never do? Does it mean you can't move forward? No, because closure can also be an internal decision. It can be, I finally understand. I don't need to revisit this anymore. I don't need another conversation. I don't need another explanation. I choose peace. This is very Pisces. So, how can you work with this full moon? Well, instead of trying to force new beginnings, use this eclipse as a reflection point. Ask yourself, what am I ready to forgive? What am I ready to stop chasing? What am I ready to stop controlling? Where am I ignoring reality? Where am I giving too much? Where do I need stronger boundaries? What dream still matters to me? And which dream am I holding on to simply because I'm afraid to admit it has changed? That's the work. So here's a simple eclipse release exercise for you. So around the full moon, take a piece of paper and write, I am ready to release, ... And don't overthink it. Write whatever comes up. Maybe it's, I'm ready to release resentment. I'm ready to release fear. I am ready to release the need for approval. I am ready to release the person I thought they would become. I'm ready to release the version of myself that believed I wasn't enough. Then write, I am willing to make room for ... And this is where you shift the energy. Peace, clarity, healthy relationships, creativity, purpose, self-trust, rest, joy, spiritual connection, whatever feels authentic to you. Now, what to watch out for? There is also a shadow side to eclipse energy. Don't make every emotion into a prophecy. Don't assume every text message is a sign from the universe. Don't make a major decision simply because you're emotional. And don't confuse intuition with fear. Pisces can be incredibly intuitive, but Pisces can also become overwhelmed by emotion and imagination. So if something comes up around the eclipse, give yourself time. Feel it before you act on it. This may be one of the best pieces of advice for this entire eclipse. So, who may feel this the most? Because this eclipse occurs around 4 degrees in Pisces, people with important natal placements around the early degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius may notice this eclipse more strongly. And of course, your sun, moon, rising sign, and house placement can change how this symbolism shows up for you personally. For example, a Pisces eclipse in the 6th house, excuse me, oh my gosh, sorry. Throat got a little dry there. Oh yeah. Gotta keep it real sometimes, people, right? So your sun, moon, rising, and house placement can change how this shows up for you personally, okay? So for example, Pisces eclipse in someone's 6th house may emphasize routines around health, habits, and work. If it's the 7th house, we're talking relationships. If it's the 10th house, we're talking career and public life. The 12th house is solitude, closure, and subconscious patterns. So don't just listen for your sun sign. Check out your rising sign. Your rising sign can tell you where this eclipse is occurring in your chart. So the deeper message here. Here's what I think is most beautiful, the most beautiful message behind this eclipse. We spend so much of our lives trying to become stronger, become smarter, become more productive, and become more successful, more organized. And all of these things have value. But sometimes growth isn't about adding something. Sometimes growth is about removing something, removing fear, removing resentment, removing fantasy, removing the relationship that has already ended emotionally, removing the identity that no longer fits, removing the belief that you have to save everybody, removing the belief that you have to have everything figured out. Sometimes becoming your next self requires releasing your previous self. So as this Pisces full moon and partial lunar eclipse approaches, don't just ask, what am I getting? Ask, what am I finally willing to let go of? Because there may be something in your life that you've been asking the universe to change. When the universe has been asking you to release it. And maybe that's the real transformation. Not getting everything you wanted, but finally becoming free from everything you no longer need. So if this message resonates with you, tell me in the comments, what are you releasing during this eclipse? Don't have to share your whole story. Just write one word. Maybe it's fear, control, resentment, the past, doubt, a relationship, guilt, or simply, I'm ready. And if you're watching this around the eclipse, remember, you don't have to have everything figured out. Sometimes the next chapter begins when you finally stop carrying the last one. So take care of yourself, give yourself some space, listen to your intuition, and most importantly, don't be afraid to let go of what you've already outgrown. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Love you guys. Bye.